Tiny bare feet on dry, cracked roads. Wooden crosses clutched in trembling hands. Their voices trembled with faith. No gold, no weapons, only prayers. They were the purest pilgrims the world had ever seen. And yet, by the end, most were gone. Not to the Holy Land, but to cages, to chains, to slave markets in cities they'd never heard of. This is the story they erased from the Crusades. The story of how children, tens of thousands of them, were sold like animals. And worse, how it wasn't an accident. It was a business. Behind this forgotten horror, we find not kings, not popes, not knights in gleaming armor, but merchants, men of trade, men of numbers, men who smiled while they sealed the fates of innocence. This is not a tale of battlefields. This is a tale of betrayal. In the spring of 1212, something strange began to stir across the villages of France and Germany. Stephen of Cloyes was only 12, a shepherd's boy, no armor, no sword, yet he claimed to carry a letter from Christ himself. He said he had seen a vision. In it, the Lord told him to lead a crusade, not with warriors but with children. For only the pure in heart, he said, could win back Jerusalem. People laughed at first, but then they watched as children began to gather. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Many were orphans. Some were sons and daughters of peasants. Others ran away from noble households. But they all believed. Across the Rhine, another boy, Nicholas of Cologne, preached the same message, that the crusade must not be fought with bloodshed, but with purity. He too gathered thousands. No one knows the exact number who marched, but some chroniclers claim it reached over 30,000. What united them all was faith and youth. And the merchants? They were watching. At first, these children walked freely through towns and villages, singing hymns, begging for bread, spreading their impossible dream. They believed the sea would part for them, that angels would guide them, that Jerusalem would fall to innocence. But innocence was never safe in the world of profit. By the time the children reached the port of Marseille, they were exhausted, hungry. Many had died along the way of disease, of exposure, of heartbreak. And still they waited by the sea, expecting it to open. Didn't, but something else did. Opportunity. Enter Hugh the Iron and William the Pig. Two merchants, wealthy, powerful, unknown to the children, but known well among the trading elites of the Mediterranean. They saw not pilgrims but product. They approached the children with smiles and offers. They said they believed in their cause. They said they would provide ships, 7 of them, to carry these young crusaders across the sea, free of charge. A miracle, they said. The children rejoiced. Their prayers were answered. And so, in the summer of 1212, the ships set sail. The children sang as they departed Marseille, unaware they had just boarded coffins. 2 of the 7 ships never reached land again. A violent storm near Sardinia shattered them. Hundreds of children drowned, their wooden crosses sinking with them into the Black Sea. The other 5, they sailed not east to the Holy Land, but south, to North Africa, to the markets of Bougie, Tunis, and Alexandria. The children, the ones who survived the voyage, were unloaded not as pilgrims, but as cargo, sold, weighed, catalogued. The markets welcomed them. Youth was valuable, foreign youth even more so. They fetched high prices, especially for those with pale skin, bright eyes, or beauty. The merchants had made their profit, and they disappeared into history. Hugh the Iron, William the Pig. The names sound like caricatures, but their actions were real, documented, whispered about in the margins of medieval chronicles, condemned quietly by a church too embarrassed to speak too loudly. No official records show they were ever punished. In fact, they may have been rewarded. In that era, human trafficking was not illegal. In Christian lands, it was frowned upon when the victims were Christian. But in Islamic markets, it was open, structured, lucrative, and these men knew it. There's evidence that some clerics, some nobles, even some city leaders may have known of the plan. Some may have turned a blind eye. Others may have invested. After all, these weren't just merchants, they were connected. The machinery of crusade was expensive. Ships, horses, armor, all of it cost gold. And when kings and nobles were bankrupt, merchants were the ones who made crusades possible. In return, they got favors, lands, influence. So when a few thousand peasant children vanished, no one asked too many questions. Some chroniclers tried to speak out. One monk in Paris wrote of the sin that smells of gold. Another hinted that the Pope wept when he learned the truth, but did nothing. A sailor in Genoa confessed, years later, that he had helped chain the children below deck, gagged their cries, and delivered them to the hands of buyers. But the official history simply moved on, and the children, those who were sold, disappeared into silence. Some were enslaved in homes. Others became servants to nobles, concubines, or workers in fields. A few were converted to Islam. Some were executed. They had believed they were marching to salvation. They marched into hell. And Hugh the Iron, William the Pig, their wealth grew. Centuries later, their names appear on trade documents and estate records. They were not treated as criminals, but as respected men of commerce. The church would later frame the Children's Crusade as a parable, a warning, a symbolic tale about the dangers of misguided faith. But it wasn't symbolic. It was systemic. It was trafficking. The Children's Crusade was not an accident. It was not a wild misadventure. It was a pipeline, from Europe's poorest to North Africa's richest, greased by faith, driven by desperation, powered by gold. And the merchants knew it. They didn't need to lift a sword. They didn't need to preach sermons. They simply waited. And when the children came to the sea, they opened the gate. This is not just a footnote of history. It's a window into the soul of the Crusades, where faith met capitalism, and innocence was converted into currency. It's easy to focus on the grand battles. Jerusalem, Antioch, Acre. But behind every crusade was a trail of debt, deals, and deception. And behind that, men like Hugh and William, the true crusaders of commerce. They didn't wear crosses. They minted them. And now their story is barely remembered. But their legacy lingers, in the silence of empty ports, in the myths of vanishing children, in the bones beneath foreign sands. The question we must ask isn't, how could this happen? It's, why did we stop talking about it? Maybe because it's too close, too familiar, because we like to think that the exploitation of innocence ended long ago. But look closer. In every war, in every crisis, there are merchants waiting, watching, weighing the value of human life. And sometimes they smile, just like Hugh, just like William. History doesn't forget everything. Sometimes it waits for someone to listen. Now you have, and now,